All right, friends, it's T-Man, and we back with a new video today. We're going to review a video by Henselmens. He's a YouTuber. He's a pretty intelligent guy. I don't know. He's got a big channel. Does a lot of videos with other, I guess, YouTubers and stuff about muscle. Let's review his video, man. So he says, this determines how much muscle you'll gain from your training. I find this video to be interesting. Okay, let's review what he has to say.
The secret sauce of muscle growth is mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is by far the most important driver of muscle growth.
So mechanical tension, what is that? That is the pulling force. So think about that. Mechanical tension, what is that? That's the pulling force. The pulling force. Are you pushing, pulling? The pulling force. All right.
Which is very clear on this. You can decompose.
Mechanical tension is associated with muscle damage. Yeah. It's lifting weights, basically. Your mechanical tension, you're lifting. This is a mechanical tension. You know what I mean? Could be mechanical stress, mechanical tension, but yeah.
Mechanical tension into active and passive components, and we can also decompose it into the level of tension and the time under tension. And it's the integral, or the area under the curve, over time, that seems to determine how much muscle we gain from our training. The level of total tension is approximated very well by our training intensity. If you lift heavier weights, your muscles have to produce more force, which requires greater tension to generate.
So if you lift heavier weights, your body has to produce more force. Okay. Here's a question. How does your body produce more force? You understand me? It's through an adaptation process. It's an adaptation. How do you build more muscle? Again, through an adaptation process. But here's the thing. So how does your body produce more force? Well, you keep lifting heavier. It's got to produce more force because it's an adaptation process. All right.
So the weight on the bar is directly proportional to the amount of tension in your muscle.
But the question is this: why does your body stop producing muscle gains? Why doesn't it give you any more muscle gains after a repeated bout? And how are muscle gains obtained? Through muscle damage. They damage, they repair, remodel, bigger and stronger. And other sequence of events, it donates its nuclei, the progenitor cell, so forth and so on. They synthesize protein to further that domain and yada, yada, yada. But the question is this. So if they rapidly adapt with a repeated bout, what do you need to do when it comes to muscle, to building muscle? See what I mean? Can you separate the two, the force production and muscle? Well, the more muscle you get too, you'll be stronger as well. You get physically stronger when you build muscle. Force production, moving a weight up and down. Yeah, you get older, you get weaker, you lose power. You're a young person, you're pretty strong. So think about it. If you gain more muscle as a young person, you're really strong. Will you get physically stronger? Yes, you'll be physically stronger than anybody else out there. That's like you, that you've gained more muscle than them. And a whole bunch of other things, man. It's complicated. All right.
Higher training intensities therefore mean higher levels of muscle tension. However, the higher the training intensity, the lower the time under tension, because you cannot do as many reps with a heavier weight. Time under tension we can measure by the number of reps that you do multiplied by your repetition tempo. That is logically how long your sets take.
Yeah, I will agree with him on that. Some of the things he says. I don't know what level of experience he has in lifting, so can't really tell you, but okay. It's interesting.
Repetition tempo is a little bit tricky in this regard and may not be necessary to measure, because if you lift with a slower tempo, you perform your reps at a slower speed, you can normally not do as many reps. So this
that will be true, yeah, because the force starts to go down at some point. Range of motion and force capacity goes down. If you're moving too slow, that's why it's better to move quickly through the exercises. Hitting type 2 muscle fibers, okay.
It balances out. If you lift with a faster tempo, you can do more reps, but shorter, more frequent reps. But if you lift with a slower tempo, you cannot do as many reps, but the reps last longer.
And you can't do full of range either. That's another thing. If you move slower, you could do full range of motion. But the problem is you won't get what you're looking for. But you could do shorter range of motions and a lot faster and a lot heavier. And look, you could go a lot heavier with a shorter range of motion, a lot heavier, and you can do more repetitions and rapidly and get more gains. But if you move slow and you're the guy that's looking for perfect form, perfect technique, perfect, this and that, you're never going to progress in the gym. You understand me? Because that's the influencers. They're all telling you to do perfect. You got a perfect form or whatever. You got to do you have to do full range of motion. It's got to be full range of motion. But all these full range of motion guys look like nothing, like dog shit in the gym, bro. All of them, they look dog shit. Their physiques, their bodies, they look dog shit, full range of motion. And they do like the 5x5 and the fucking, all the garbage training in the gym, bro. Get it? The gym bro, bullshit training, whatever. They're not really getting anywhere. That's the thing. Have they gotten really stronger on any of these things? Maybe some stuff, progressively overloading, giving you a forced production. But they've never really got physically stronger because they haven't built any muscle. They haven't really recomped their body or anything. The body has stayed the same. The weight got easier to lift on some of the lifts that they're practicing at, but the rest has never really progressed. It's not progressing. It's stagnated. That's the problem when it comes to the lifting world. It's so unequally balanced. It's crazy, bro. I don't know, but whatever. Okay.
So this kind of washes out. And there's also an interaction effect with metabolic stress if the set lasts longer. And if you lift more...
Yeah, metabolic stress. Okay, mechanical stress. They call that mechanical stress. Mechanical tension, mechanical stress lasts longer. Yeah, sure.
Explosively, in turn, that can increase the amount of force production. If you lift more explosively, higher force output, therefore that comes from higher mechanical tension in the muscle. Force and tension are inside the muscle. They are the same. It's the tension that's producing the force. So repetition.
Yeah, they are the same. I would agree, yes.
Tempo kind of washes out and is a little bit hard to measure. So let's simplify the time under tension to the total amount of reps. It then logically follows that the amount of...
Okay, this is intelligent. I like this. Time under tension, yes, total amount of reps, okay.
Hypertrophy you're going to get, how much muscle you're going to build, is the product of how many reps you're doing with a given training intensity.
There you go, guys. He just proved it, see? The amount of muscle that you're going to get is the amount of repetitions that you're doing in that given intensity. Yeah. And so, meaning the amount of damage that you create, that is the amount of muscle that you will build. Ha ha! Yeah, man.
Or how many reps you're doing with a given weight. If you're using different weights for your sets or for different exercises.
But again, if you're adapted, there is no more damage. So you're not going to get anything. Do you see how complicated this is? In other words, you still need to get an adaptation. It's based on an adaptation principle. He's not mentioning that. I'm going to mention it for you in this video. It's based on adaptations. In order to get muscle, it's based on an adaptation system. That's how it's based on. No adaptations, no muscle growth. That's it. It's really simple, man. Plus, protein synthesis needs to exceed that breakdown. So it's really good to eat a shitload of protein, animal protein, okay? Which is highly nutrient. That's what your body wants.
We can simplify things even further, because just like for repetition tempo with training intensity, we know that if you lift a heavier weight, you have higher tension, but less time under tension. So just like...
Okay, if it's super heavy, yes, less time under tension because it's too heavy for you to manage. So what do? You manage with a weight that you can manage for very high repetitions. And then when you get stronger on that, then you move heavier. It'll start to feel lighter because the amount of damage, the tension, the damage, the muscles repairing and remodeling will make you stronger, and those weights will feel lighter, and you will lift heavier, and you can still do higher reps again and keep moving higher and higher.
With repetition tempo, let's call this a wash. So if the training intensity changes, we can simplify our measure of muscle growth further to the total number of sets per unit of time, let's call it a week for convenience sake, per muscle group. So if the training intensity is the same, we can say that hypertrophy is approximated or predicted quite well by the number of reps that you do.
That's true. I can predict what people are getting in the gym according to their repetition range, what they're doing. They never move for higher repetitions. Well, some people will do the same reps, but then move for a little bit more sets. They'll try to do more sets, or they'll do even less, or they'll mix them up, which is even worse. You gotta stay with one thing at a time. Gotta do one thing at a time. But like I said, the higher the repetition, it will dictate the amount of muscle you build because it's based on an adaptation system. Again, these are all adaptory. They're all adaptations. The overworking of a muscle will cause that muscle to damage. That's the whole point of a high repetition. It's an overworking of that muscle. Really, what he's not telling you is this. I say overworking of an untrained muscle if you resensitize and come back and do these sets and reps, whatever. Overworking because you're doing your entire upper body. So regardless whether I do a 5x10, the 5x10, I'm doing every body part, and I'm doing a lot of different exercises for everything, for the back area, the shoulders, arms, forearms, the chest, the abs, whatever, neck. So it's an overworking of an untrained muscle, and it's resensitizing every week you come back after repairing and remodeling. But that's different kind of training. A lot of people can't handle that. You could do these splits, but again, that too is difficult. That could be difficult. You could be over, how should I put it? Overworking that muscle, but it's already trained and you could shrink it. You could lose these muscle fibers. It really depends. Like I said, it really is experience that's going. I've done all kinds of different training regimes, and it's experience that teaches you these things. You get stronger too on a higher force production. If you take more time off, you come back, you notice you're a lot stronger. You're a lot stronger also out of a repair and a remodeling, a whole bunch of stuff, bro. Because there's resensitization, plus you're accumulating more of these androgen receptors. They're rebuilding, giving you that force production, making you a lot stronger, lifting heavier, so forth and so on. It's a whole thing, man.
If the training intensity differs, we would expect hypertrophy to be predicted simply by the number of sets per week per muscle group that you're doing. There, we just made the Henselmens hypertrophy model, or Menno's muscle model if you want. Now let's look at how this super simplified model holds up against the scientific research. Let's start with repetition tempo. Repetition tempo I discussed in a previous video. Indeed, just as our model predicts, repetition tempo seems to be mostly a wash. The tempo that you use to perform your exercises doesn't have a lot of effect on muscle growth. As long as you at least control your weights within reason, it seems that
it won't do anything for muscle growth. Muscle is based on muscle damage. In order to damage it, it has to be overworked. It's not being overworked. It's not damaging. You're not getting some new adaptations. That's another way of getting adaptations, is striving for higher repetitions to overwork the muscle, to force it to damage, to get a new adaptation. Do you understand me? That is another way. Like I said, in the community section, I have something there. One guy posted, and I posted in my community section. You can read it. Resensitization, higher reps, doing, on unfamiliar forms, on a custom, so forth and so on. All these things will get you these adaptations. If you don't know how they work, I suggest you go out and figure it out.
whether you do 2 or 8-second repetitions, or even 1-second repetitions sometimes, you can get equivalent results in terms of muscle growth. So, our model performs well for repetition tempo. For training intensity, just as our model predicts, it is indeed a wash as well. I also discussed this in a recent video on the most important things for muscle growth and strength development. Training intensity does not have any effect on muscle growth within the range of about 5 to 30 repetitions. This is called the hypertrophy zone myth. The old idea of the range being just 6 to 12 repetitions is clearly debunked by research, and research basically finds that sets within 85% to as low as 30% of your 1RM stimulate approximately equal muscle growth on a set-by-set basis. So just as our model.
What type of muscle growth? You mean muscle damage? Muscle grows through muscle damage. That's how it grows. It reaches an MND size limit, beyond where the progenitor could donate any more extranuclei to that domain to support further muscle growth. So what the fuck do you need? What's going to grow muscle? Muscle damage. and then protein synthesis needs to exceed this breakdown for it to hypertrophy. It's really simple, man. If no damage, zero fucking gains, bro, in muscle growth. You fucking understand me, people out there? If you're fucking not damaging muscles, if you're not getting these adaptations through muscle damage, you ain't fucking growing. You ain't growing jack shit.
Predicts training intensity doesn't influence muscle growth, and it makes sense to simplify our measure of muscle growth to the total number of sets per week per muscle group in the event that training intensities do differ. For training volume, this model also...
You still need a certain amount of rest period off. So if you've gotten, I don't know how much damage you've gotten in those muscles, if you've gotten an adaptation. I can't really tell you. It depends. You could be minor damage or more damage. I posted this a long time ago already, a while ago in my community section. It tells you minor damage will get you a repair and a remodeling. Massive damage will get you a repair and a remodeling, and it will create new muscle fiber based on the first one, the genetics of the first one. And so that's even better. That's the reason why you want to strive and move for higher repetitions. The higher the repetition, the more damage you create, the more you're able out of that adaptation, you can create more muscle fiber. You understand me? More myofibrillar growth. Yeah. So what is the point going to the gym if you're just going to fucking lift 5x10 or even a 5x20 is still not enough? It may be minor fucking damage. Sometimes the damage is so minor that the body just says, fuck it. There's no point of doing anything here. Yeah, it says that in science. It tells you, it just says, fuck this. So there you go. So the scale of damage that you're getting through an adaptation, it's all dependent on your training, what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, but I would strive for higher repetitions, medium to heavy weight, higher repetition. Yeah, moving through the exercises. Again, it's not based on full range. It's based on adaptations. It has nothing to do with full range or anything or what you're doing in the gym. What it has to do with the amount of damage that you're getting in that session. It could be a partial range, a medium range. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but whatever it is, it's got to be high repetition. I don't give a shit. And if you can't manage it with full range, then do partial. I don't know. It's really up to you. With partial range of motion, you can lift heavier and you can move quickly through the exercises, getting more damage.
Also predicts a feature of the dose-response relationship, the relationship between how much volume you do and how much muscle you gain. We know that there is a diminishing returns curve, a very strong diminishing returns effect, in fact.
The diminishing return curve is the RBE. It's the protective effect against muscle damage. It's an adaptation process. You're adapted now. Muscles adapt by how? By repairing and remodeling stronger so they don't bust and grow. It's the whole point.
For some people, that means
the protective effect.
Is that if you do one set, you get
from building any muscle.
All of your results already, especially if you're training to failure.
Yeah.
In one set, you get a lot of your results, and in the second set, you get some additional results, but they are not as big as the first set. And in the third set, you get just a little bit, incrementally smaller extra.
Yes, that's why I said in my videos, the first set is usually the biggest damage that you're going to get. So you want to do 60 repetitions. If I don't know, whatever you could do. If it's 40, then do 40. If it's 60, then do 60. Me, I'm going to strive to do the highest repetition on my first set. My very first set on whatever exercise I'm doing is going to be super high. And like I said, don't lower the weight, lower the repetition. You understand me? Do not lower the weight, lower the repetition, but start with a higher repetition. That will equal the most damage in the first session. Because later it's going to start protecting itself from any more damage.
Effects of every additional set that you do. This model predicts that quite well, because when the training intensity is the same as it is when you're doing multiple sets with the same weight, the number of reps per set decrease. And
the number of sets or reps, they decrease. Of course they decrease, because range of motion, muscle damage, force production goes down. That's the whole point. Yeah. Hello. It's kind of obvious. It tells you this in NCBA.
That the measure of muscle growth is the total amount of reps that you do when your training intensity is the same. Since every set adds fewer additional repetitions, every set adds a progressively smaller stimulus.
It does, because you're damaged. If these have micro injuries, micro damages, You're going to get weaker through the session. That's the whole point. Hello.
For muscle growth, which is exactly what we see in the research. Now let's look at training to failure. Training to failure is also perfectly predicted by the model. I also did a recent video on this, so you can look at that on my channel. Training to failure is predicted extremely well simply by the total amount of repetitions.
I do not agree with training to failure. I'm not a person for training to failure, but I guess you could say that. You could do that. Maybe some people would equate that as training to failure. I don't know. You could do that, but I'm not that kind of person. This whole training to failure thing, whatever.
Training to failure per se does not seem to have much, if any, effect on muscle growth. Rather, it is only the effect of how many reps you're doing that predicts muscle growth.
There you go. See, he agreed with me. Training to failure, zero muscle growth. It depends on the amount of sets and reps that you're doing in that session. That will equate to you building muscles.
Studies have found, for example, that if you do multiple sets further away from failure, you get similar results or equivalent results as if you do fewer sets to failure when the total amount of repetitions ends up being the same. Whereas if you are doing a fixed number of sets, training to failure only increases muscle growth when it increases the total number of reps. In a lot of studies, training to failure does not increase muscle growth when it does not increase the total amount of repetition volume, because the first set is very fatiguing and therefore you get fewer additional repetitions.
Yes, I agree with him 100%, bro. He's absolutely correct.
In the later sets, meaning that the total set volume over time kind of equals out. And again, same total number of repetitions done with the same weight, same total amount of tension and time under tension, therefore same muscle growth. Our super simple model also performs very well when looking at the research on training to failure. How about rest intervals? Can our simple model also predict the effect of rest intervals on muscle growth? In 2014, I wrote a review paper critiquing the existing stance of most researchers in the industry that short rest intervals are better for muscle growth. I showed in my research that
I don't know about short rep intervals are better for muscle growth. You mean for damaging muscles between sets? You're not growing muscles by lifting weights, bro. I don't know what he's talking about. Short intervals into, maybe damaging muscle fibers. I don't know. You're going to lose a lot of force in that session. You're going to lose a lot of force. I think you need more rest. Personally, if you're asking me, you need more rest between sessions sometimes. It depends. It's all relative. Sometimes I don't rest a lot. I just keep going through the session. It depends on how heavy the weight is and your high repetition, how heavy that weight is that you can manage. I don't know. Sometimes if it's not super heavy, I'm doing high reps. I can keep going and going and going. I need short rest intervals in the session. I can keep going. It's all relative, I guess.
The theory that you want short rest intervals because they promote metabolic stress and more hormonal responses is completely flawed, doesn't work, and results are better approximated by training volume. The next year, I was part of a research group that put this idea to the test, and we compared 1 and 3 minute rest intervals. We found that 3 minute rest intervals stimulated greater muscle hypertrophy than 1 minute rest intervals. And my hypothesis was that this was because of the additional volume. Now, in that study, we could not demonstrate the link between the volume and the muscle growth very clearly, but a more recent study by Longo et al. From 2022 very clearly found that the effect of rest intervals is indeed very well predicted simply by the total training volume. Longer rest periods enhance muscle growth because they increase the number of reps that you do, which increases the time.
Yeah, that rest period, when you come back, you're able to do higher repetitions again. But if you come back too fast, if you the rest is too short, you can't do that much higher repetitions. You notice that. Sometimes I'll rest even longer. I'll have a conversation with somebody, I'll walk around, then I'll come back, and I can literally force out more reps a lot easier, I find, all of a sudden, than it would when I just kept going at it, hacking at it too quickly. It's kind of obvious, man. Come on.
Under tension at a given tension. Exactly like our model says, the total amount of reps that you do with a given weight is a good measure of the total amount of time under tension with a given tension. And therefore, that stimulates more muscle growth, at least up to the point that you can recover from it, presumably.
Look, I'll tell you this. Usually from that first set repetition that you do, whether you do 60 or 40, that'll dictate the amount of muscle damage you've already accumulated in that first set rep that you just did. Let's say you did the first set and it was 40. That's a very high repetition range for somebody doing a pretty heavy, moderate, heavy weight. That's a lot. That will accumulate muscle damage right away. There'll be damage there right away from the first set. And then it'll be reduced. It'll be reduced to damage, but you're still trying to hack out these higher repetitions and damaging more muscle fibers. That's the whole point.
Concretely, the researchers compared the amount of muscle growth that people got from training with short rest intervals, long rest intervals. Short rest intervals equated in volume to the longer rest intervals, meaning they had to do extra sets. And long rest intervals equated to the short rest intervals, meaning they did fewer sets, because with a longer rest interval, you can do more reps per set. And here in the graph, you can see the results. The long rest interval group had the best gains, together with the short rest interval group that had the volume equated to the long rest interval group. In other words, these were the two groups that did the most volume. And it didn't matter whether you got that volume from resting longer after each set, therefore doing more reps per set, or whether you did more sets to get the same number of total repetitions. And you can see that the group with the short rest interval had worse results, and the group with the longer rest interval also had worse results when their training volume, the number of reps, was equated to that of the shorter rest interval group. In other words, your rest interval itself doesn't seem to have a lot of effect on muscle growth. The effect is mediated entirely by the effect on training volume. We see a similar effect in the research on training frequency. If you logically think about it, this makes sense, because training frequency and rest intervals are essentially the same thing. We call it a rest interval when it's 5 minutes, but when it's 5 days, we start talking about training frequency. In effect, though, it just means that you're training a muscle, there's a stimulus on contractile tissue, and there's a certain amount of time that passes, and then you do it again. And at some point, we start distinguishing between a rest interval and a long rest interval, which we call training frequency. So, most of the research on training frequency finds that if you equate total volume, training frequency does not have an effect on muscle growth. You can train a muscle twice a week, 4 times a week, once a week, every single day, even twice a day, although there's not that much research on twice a day, and you get equivalent muscle growth if the total training volume is the same between conditions. However, when you allow people to increase their training volume with their training frequency, there is a trend for greater gains with higher training frequencies. This is illustrated well by a recent study by Neves et al. From 2022. They compared 3 conditions. One group did 9 sets once per week, one group did 3 sets 3 times per week, and the other condition did the 3 sets 3 times per week, equating the volume to the group doing 9 sets once per week. Now what happened is that doing 9 sets once per week had led to the same gains in muscle cross-sectional area, muscle growth, when the total repetition volume, or the total work volume, I think they used in this study, it leads to the same thing if you're using the same weight, was equated. In other words, it didn't matter whether you train a muscle once or 3 times per week if the total amount of repetitions that you're doing remains the same. However, if you spread out your volume over more sessions, it does not normally keep your number of reps the same. That's something academics do in their research studies because it equates for the effect of training volume, and we want to isolate variables. But in practice, in the gym, where we're training, we are not in a volume equated condition. So what happens, and in this study this also happened, when you let people do 3 sets 3 times per week instead of 9 sets in one day, you get more reps when you do it in 3 sessions than you do it in 1 session, because you are more fresh every time you're training. So, in this case, instead of about 2% increase in quadriceps cross-sectional area from the group training once per week or 3 times per week with the same volume, the group that was training 3 times per week and left to their own devices, meaning they increased their total training volume, they got approximately double the muscle growth, 4% increase in muscle quadriceps cross-sectional area. So this, just like the rest interval research, shows that training frequency per se does not seem to have a big effect on muscle growth, but if you are increasing your training volume, whether it's repetitions or number of sets, by increasing your training frequency, then it does increase muscle growth. And needless to say, research also supports that if you increase your training volume, like you literally just you go for 1 session per week and you do 2 sessions per week, that also increases muscle growth because you're literally just doing a lot more volume in terms of sets and repetitions. So again, our super simple model performs quite well, explaining the effect of training frequency on muscle growth. Now, the Henselmens
It's a little bit overcomplicated, but whatever, man. Yeah, it works. Okay.
hypertrophy model, if you will, is definitely not perfect. It will break down when you start looking at very complicated niche scenarios, drop sets, some kinds of advanced training techniques. The model does not perfectly
Don't do drop sets. Don't do any of those things. They don't work.
explain these results. But I think that this model is currently the best we have, and it has a lot of advantages. For one, it's extremely simple. We just predict muscle growth by the amount of repetitions that you do for that muscle. If the weight is the same, and if the weight is not the same, we just look at the total number of sets that you do for that muscle group per week. So it's super simple, it's quantifiable, it's concrete, you can literally measure it, and it fits with a lot of the scientific research on a lot of training variables. It predicts all of them very well. So in that sense, I think it is a model that is very practical to use, and it is also theoretically completely substantiated because the model just simplifies mechanical tension to operational concrete training variables. So it just
In other words, it's an overworking of a muscle. That's it. An overworking, a higher repetition means the muscle is being overworked. And if it's overworked, it's going to give at some point and damage. And that will cause the progenitor to come out of quiescence. It'll split, divide, increase in number, differentiate, and whatever, and it'll repair and remodel these muscles bigger and stronger and donate its nuclei to that domain to support further muscle growth. Okay, man?
equates the amount of tension with the training intensity, and then it equates the time under tension with the number of reps that you do. Therefore, the model simply says that the total amount of muscle that you're going to gain for any muscle group is predicted by the total number of repetitions per week that you're doing for a muscle group if we're holding the training intensity, which is the tension, the same. And if the tension differs, then we're simplifying it even further to the total number of sets per week per muscle group. So it's a very simple model.
There you go. It's pretty simple, man. He just told you guys. If you people are staying in the gym and you're doing the same set rep scheme all the time you're coming in the gym, you're adapted. You people are adapted because you're always doing the same stuff over and over again. A muscle, for it to break, for it to damage, has to be overworked. It's an overworking of a muscle. If you don't overwork it, it's never going to damage. You're not going to see any more adaptations in muscle growth, nor are you going to see any more physical natural strength increase either. And then you'll be like a small guy lifting a heavy weight, practicing at doing that. Most people are doing that. Most people are faking it anyways, taking drugs, creatine supplements for this forced production, whatever. It's not even based on their natural strength. A lot of people, they just fake it. But whatever, man, like I said, you could be just like that, stagnated.
Model, it has theoretical support, it fits quite well with the research, and I think this may help you cut through the noise and also predict in your own training program if you change some things, will this increase muscle growth or not? Is this really important? So I hope this helps you in your own training. If you like this type of evidence-based fitness content, I'd be honored if you like and subscribe.
I liked it. It's interesting. He's got a great channel, man. He just pointed out stuff I already know. I just simply am sharing it with other people because I already know these channels. I know who these people are making these videos. Well, the good ones. He's been on a talk show just recently. He was talking with somebody. I can't remember what they were talking about, sugar or something. I have to go back and look at that. I never had a chance to finish that video. I saw something. I got to watch it. Anyways, friends, tell me what you think about that. Like, subscribe, support the channel. Helps with the algorithm. But I know people are not going to help, not subscribe, you know. Because they're not, just don't want to learn anything, man. They just want to stay stagnated forever. All right, see you in the next one. Ciao, friends.